A warm welcome to all my panel members. I think Clement from KFC has really put in a lot of details and put the subject matter in context in terms of what are the opportunities, challenges in the flower industry, important topic, access to air freight capacity, freight cost. These are recurring subjects that come across. Just want to straight jump into the questions. Like to keep it as interactive as possible. Please, anybody is free to come in to add your comments. And if you have a question for any other panel members, please do so. And I'll try to take one or two questions from the audience towards the end of the panel discussion. I've been getting a little bit of a confused reading reports from what has been reported in the media in terms of air freight capacity in the first 2 months or just the ahead around the first big peak season, which is the Valentine's Day. I believe in the October, November, there has been a concern about the air freight capacity out of NBO. I'm basically concentrating a bit too much on the air freight part of it. We have a separate panel discussion on the sea freight later in the afternoon. I've been reading about, of course, airlines pulling out the capacity to more lucrative markets outside, and as a result, there has been a lack of capacity out of Nairobi. But I also have read, I think, around the Valentine's Day, the kind of export targets, a flower export target has been met, or it has gone beyond that. Just want to get an idea in terms of from every participant, maybe except Sam. Probably Sam is not clued into that, but I think the others, particularly Clement, Elizabeth, Claris, and Eliud, can actually throw some light on what has been your experience in the first big peak season of 2025. Did you have problems on the air freight capacity? Freight rate, of course, has always been a point of discussion. Yeah, first reaction, maybe Eliud, you can start with.
Good morning, everyone. I think my experience this year, we had a lot of offloads. Some of the shipments were actually being rolled over. And besides that, I think my biggest concern was the freight rate went up from $3.2 per kilo to almost 4.5. And that was really, really hurting the business because some of the prices we had committed during Valentine were pre-confirmed, and we were not anticipating that the freight rate would go that high. So we had a dual problem. That is, one of them is the capacity and the rates. But I think the other panelists can also comment their experience.
Elizabeth.
Good morning, everyone. I want to confirm from what Eliud has said. Every year during Valentine, we are confronted with the uncertainty of whether we are going to be able to deliver the flowers to the marketplace and deliver them in a manner that ensures that we get something in return. I think what I saw this year, of course, there were a lot of offloads. Capacity was a little better than last year, but very expensive. So most of the farms sometimes opted to keep the products at home because it was not going to make any economic sense to send the flowers at the available freight costs. So the challenge of capacity is still there, I would say, because there is a difference between having capacity and having affordable capacity. So it's still something that needs to be looked at. Yeah.
Yeah, in fact, Eliud and Elizabeth represent flower farms. They have farms. I like to get Claris. You source a lot of flowers from different farmers. What has been your experience?
Good morning, everyone. So for us as a middleman, the balance is a bit different from the growers because what we experienced was a bit of issues on both sides. So capacity-wise, it wasn't as bad as last year for sure. because we were able to. So we thought it was going to be very bad this year, so we actually had preempted it and chartered. But now the issue came because some of the growers were not able to meet, the demand that, was pre-confirmed. So for us as a middleman, the balance is a bit of 50-50 on both sides.
Clement, you have an overview of all of this that's happening. Did the export target in terms of around the Valentine's Day, did that happen? And of course, there has been freight capacity. Was that also matched with the demand?
Yeah, I think what happened this year was very unique because we had a very unprecedented situation based on the fact that the Chinese holiday happened within some period. That is how we got much more capacity this end. Otherwise, it would have been disaster. And most people were actually apprehensive that they would be able to move their produce within the capacity, the regular capacity that we have in Nairobi. But having said that, we ended up having much more capacity than we expected. In fact, we had a few flights that left Nairobi without getting full because of that. But I think we need to put this in the wider conversation so that we don't have to rely on circumstances that we do not have control over, but we have a situation where we can control certain factors, and the growers, exporters have an assurance that they will have that capacity going forward. And therefore, we need to ask ourselves, how do we then attract more capacity, as I said, during the peaks like Valentine's into Nairobi? The costs may not come down, but we start first with capacity, because you can't be talking about cost if you have not dealt with the capacity. So on average, we need about 3,500 on a normal week, but during the peaks, it goes up to 4,500 tons per week. Are we in a place where we can have more people dedicating their freight this way into Nairobi because it's Valentine's and we have a huge volumes to move from Nairobi into the market? What kind of incentives do we need to create for them other than saying, yeah, we just have flowers? Are there cost drivers that we need to touch during those periods and give a holiday to them to tell them, yeah, here we are, apart from, for you to move, we are giving you a holiday on this and that. And this is where the private sector and government, I think, meets. Because when we sit in a room, I'm sure that we can be able to isolate certain cost drivers that will attract more airlines into Nairobi. And this is where, Rajiv, for example, Sanjeev, from Astral, maybe can help us to think through carefully which are these drivers, especially during the peaks, that we can be able to touch that will get in much more capacity into Nairobi. So this is a discussion that I think we ought to be having now and not waiting again, because Mother's Day is just coming up. The UK Mother's Day was yesterday, but we are having the bigger one, which is the European Mother's Day, around 10th, I think 10th or 11th of May. And we will be back to the same discussion. Do we want always to be working in crisis, or we are preparing ourselves much better than we have done before?
So the sense that I get is that there was a spike in supply of air freight, but it has not really reflected on the decline on the freight rate. That's quite unique. I know we have I think 2 representatives of the airlines within the room. We have on stage Patricia. So Sanjeev, my friend, is already here. Sanjeev, you need to get more planes out of NBO. Patricia, what is your evaluation? Did you put in additional capacity ahead of the Valentine's Day, the Mother's Day, UK Mother's Day just over, and what's the plan to provide that required capacity for the European Mother's Day?
Okay, for us, Astral Aviation, we we do more of Middle East and Eastern Europe. Because we're operating at 767-200, the range is 5 to 6 hours. So those are the destinations that it can reach. And Eastern Europe, we easily go because we have a second hub in UAE, DWC. So we can go there, then we mount the flight from there. So in case you want us for the Mother's Day or Women's Day for Eastern Europe, then you can let us know. We can be able to work with you on that. For Europe, we are intending as Astral Aviation to have, we're going to have a 767-300 coming in 2 weeks. The capacity is 50 tons. So hopefully by October we can go into Europe because the range is longer, is 9 hours, so we can be able to do Europe comfortably. And from then we can support the sector because we'll put in extra capacity, perhaps 2 flights into UK mainly. Then steadily we can move to other parts of Europe. And in 2027 or late part of 2026, we expect to bring in a 777. So that will be more capacity that we'll be able to put in as Astral Aviation into the market to assist.
Jacob, you're a close observer of all what happens. Of course, you are the custodian of the airport. You don't run airline, but you would want capacity, access to air freight capacity to be made available. You want more airlines to fly out of Nairobi to support the perishable and the flower industry. Cold chain infrastructure is an important thing that you work with your stakeholders within the airport. How actively are you working with stakeholders to make sure that capacity is made available, infrastructure is enhanced over a period of time?
Well, thank you very much. First, on the issue of capacity, indeed, like my friend Clement mentioned earlier, this year had, and late last year had various unprecedented incidences. If we remember, we had the issue of security at the Gulf of Aden, and that actually created a lot of hiccups and bullwhip effects on the supply chains into Europe, which means basically the demand for air freight capacity spiked to the extent that there was reduced frequencies to this region, and that increased the rates for operation and exports from this region. So that created a freighter crisis. But towards the end of the year, we are happy that lines started coming back to JKIA. And the reason for that majorly is because of improved connectivity index from JKIA. I know in the room we have Frankfurt, you have Brussels, we have got various airports that are coming to look at how they can benefit and look at the potential use of their airports so that we demystify the JKIA or Nairobi Amsterdam route. Because that in effect in itself creates a bottleneck in the terms of movement of freight towards a destination. And we all know it's because of the Astral auction that everybody wants to take their flowers there. But if the flower channels and the exporters here diversify even their markets and approach to direct market, then that effect will fizzle out. But in terms of value addition, we have been having caucuses with our stakeholders where improvement of the quality side of things than quantity makes it better for sustainability of the business, to the extent that we have collaborations between our stakeholders. Expo Lanka is collaborating positively with Swissport for their cold chain, same as Mitchell Codes and Lift Cargo for decompressing and bringing flower temperatures as low as possible to eliminate farm heat. And we all know that indeed it is the shelf life that supports and extends the quality of flowers and pricing. If you look at the sea front, Mr. Tulezi mentioned to you about the reaction of there would be consumers on that side, notwithstanding the period of time that it has been in the high seas. And not all flowers are able to be exported through that way. But with more technology and research done in that, the future has it that would have a very more multimodal approach towards handling of flowers and their exports. So from where we sit, capacity has still been restrictive aspects, but we hope that the market forces will play in favor of having that multimodal look into things. But then again, our capacity in JKIA, which is about 1.2 million tons throughput per year, we are still operating close to 400 million kilos per year. So it means we still are at a third, and we have got 2/3 excess capacity to fulfill per year. So there's a lot of room for improvement, and that will only come if we diversify our markets, look to the Americas, look to the East, and not only rely on the EU as now a conduit for tracking into Russia and other mainland markets into Europe. So we have to move directly from Nairobi airport to airport or with online, and then we'll find that we'll not have that issue of congestion in Amsterdam and other areas. But we are happy that we're having connectivity index improved, and that will actually reduce the load of having a demand for only one sector, and that's where the problem is, even in the rights to fly. Thank you.
Sam, you've been visiting this event for the last few editions. You've been engaging with flower and perishable growers, exporters, and other service providers. In fact, we have a number of European airports present here. I think airports play a key important role in terms of facilitating that trade, create that trade routes, trade corridor. We have seen it in some of the other commodities. We have also seen it in with certain airports creating the corridor for the flower trade, because of which some of the other key stakeholders within the air logistic value chain. Have you seen things change over a period of time, or things remain the same? I'll also add something more, because I was talking to one of the very established flower exporter grower out of Kenya, and I was trying to get him for one of our earlier conferences in February. And he said, Reggie, what is the point of me coming and talking to you there? It is problems are the same every year. We continue to discuss. I was not disappointed by that. I think changes do not happen overnight. Sometimes we pursue the certain goals, and it may take more time than we expected. So there is a certain amount of pessimism, but at the same time, the reality is something that we need to face with. That doesn't mean that we will give up on getting the stakeholders to discuss, address the challenges, and over a period of time, sometimes we will achieve the result. Sam.
Thank you, Reggie. To be completely honest, I share that opinion a little bit in the sense that I've been doing it for some years now, and you see indeed some of the issues stay the same and keep on emerging or just are not vanishing. And for me, or at least for what we try to do as an airport, is then look constantly for that opportunity to change something. On the one hand, the fact that it continues to be an issue helps us, because that emphasizes the fact that, okay, maybe we should do something about it, but it makes it also hard to pinpoint where exactly. And as an airport authority, we are only a small part of the value chain, in the sense that we're talking a lot about capacity, about rates, about other issues, and these are things we have no control over. So for us, it's constantly looking at, okay, what do we control and what can we change? And some of the things we are finally getting some traction on is on the one hand procedures, and on the other hand infrastructure. And let me explain. The handling agents at an airport have a big role in both procedures and infrastructures. And as an airport, you are sometimes, although it maybe sound weird, but a little bit sidelined, or at least in the setting we operate as airport. But there, because it keeps on being an issue, we finally can step in as an airport and say, okay, if this is still an issue, we can and need to take control over it. So therefore, at this point, we're looking into how can we take a few of the barriers away, physical barriers. Brussels has a quite unique setup of transferring from airside to landside. This is something that we will, in the very near future, change to expedite actually specifically perishable products, because these suffer the most from these transit times, something that is packaged well and that is maybe not even temperature controlled, does not suffer that long from 15, half an hour extra. But in perishables, and especially flowers, that half an hour extra or less, so to say, to get on the truck is making a huge difference. And then the second point, and that is actually, I found the talk of Clement very interesting, about the EU getting more stringent and more strict on phytosanitary inspections. From a European consumer, I applaud that, because that means that the products we can buy in the shops we can rest assured that they're in perfect condition, or that they're completely safe. But of course, I can also imagine what the impact is on you as growers or African exporters. And there, if we see that indeed for Kenyan products, or for roses and for specific products, the inspection rates are going up to 25%, but maybe even to 50 or 100%, that hugely impacts the inspection capacity needed. And there, up till now, as an airport, we've been at the grace of the handling agents, putting in that capacity, putting in these inspection points, these fridges, these quarantine areas or holding areas. But of course, from an handling agent's perspective, these investments are sometimes not worthwhile because they're very expensive. They depend on which airlines they are handling at that point. They depend on their licenses. They depend on so many things, and they can't see that long horizon. So there, we're also gonna step in and making sure that that inspection capacity is there. Because it's one thing to be inspected, but then what happens next is also really important, because if something is put on hold and flowers are then put in suboptimal conditions, they may be lost. But if you can keep them at the right temperature, you can keep them stored well, they can still go to market even with a small delay, and also everything that is okay can move through very fast. So these are a few things that we're finally are able to control or take control as an airport, where we've been long at the grace of third parties. So I think there, to answer your initial question once again, there is a lot to be pessimistic, or there is a lot to say, okay, we're talking about, or we keep on talking about the same topics, but on the other hand, it's the art is to see the silver lining and to get something out of that. Okay, what can we change? So that is what we still try to do.
Yeah, I think businesses do happen at the most suitable surrounding circumstances. So I think e-commerce did play a great role towards, I think in the last 1 year, air freight capacity moved to Trans-Pacific. That's one aspect of it. I think I was also fascinated by what Clement, some of the numbers that he said about in 21 years from 2003 to 2025, 8.6% to 16.1% in terms of the Kenya's flower air freight. I don't think we need to wait for the next 20 years for these numbers to go up. The purpose of an event like this is to make sure that we collectively work together to achieve some of the goals that we have set. 3.7 billion in terms of the value that is added to the Kenyan GDP from the flower industry. Interesting numbers. I won't get all the flower exporters, growers, in terms of you're waiting for the next peak season coming for the European Mother's Day. When you look at where do you want your markets are, I'm sure that you work with your freight forwarders as your key partner. Do you have a say in terms of the destination, the airports that you want to fly to, the airlines that you want to work with? Is there a freedom that you enjoy in terms of deciding that? Eliud?
In terms of airlines, most of the time we rely on our freight consolidators because they have sometimes challenges. We know that there are some airlines that have pulled out of Kenya, and therefore we go by the options that they bring on the table. So currently, in terms of the airports, we have our preferences as exporters, but sometimes again, if that option is not available, we just go by what the freight forwarders will provide. And that is my take. Looking at now the upcoming event, the Mother's Day, I think the UK Mother's Day is over. Now we are waiting for the International Mother's Day. That cuts across Europe. But we see the main destination being Holland, that is Amsterdam. And then most of the cargo is trucked into different countries within Europe. So that would be the main destination for this event.
What is the portion of your flower export going by air? Is it 100%?
We used to do some on sea freight, but since the war broke out in the Middle East, we are no longer doing that. So we are doing all of it 100% through the air freight. And 50% of what we produce is actually going to Europe. The other 50% is other destinations.
What are the other destinations outside the Europe? And to Europe, Amsterdam is your gateway.
So the other destinations include Middle East, in particular is Saudi Arabia, Dubai, Kuwait, Oman, and other regions within the Middle East. But we also do Australia, we do Japan, we also do some bit of small shipments to other regions in Africa.
How much of your volume is going to the auction route and how much is direct?
We do 10% to the auction and 90% direct.
Okay, that is a substantial. Elizabeth.
I think what I can say, there's always a lot of discussions with the freight agents in terms of our preferences, but in most cases the option is not there because especially during the peaks, the most critical thing is to be able to move your flowers on time. Most of our flowers, of course, have to go through Amsterdam, and that is our preferred destination. But in certain circumstances, they have to be shipped through other airports, Brussels. And of course, they have to be tracked, which comes with a risk because once you ship your flowers direct, then you're in control of the cool chain and there are fewer disruptions. But if they have to be taken to an airport that is far and they have to be tracked, then you run the risk of temperature issues and handling. Then you also realize that the phytosanitary issues are different between the countries. And sometimes you may land into some issues because the flowers landed in a different territory and the terms are different. So if given an option, we prefer direct, but that is something that we discuss. Sometimes it's not there, but sometimes you can get that option.
What is the portion between auction and the direct?
Currently, we do about 70% direct and 30% auction.
Do you see that number changing soon?
We would like to keep it like that because we believe in presenting our product in the different markets. The auction is a good place for benchmarking and to present your products and to be able to almost like display to the world what you have. So we like to keep the ratios like that.
Outside Europe, which is your most significant market?
Middle East is becoming very significant, but we also send to other places like Australia. We also do the Eastern Europe. Yeah.
Russia was a good market earlier?
Yes.
Russia was a good market earlier?
Yeah, it was.
China?
Not currently. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Claris, Wafex Kenya is a subsidiary of Wafex, the Australian company, and you source flowers from different growers. What has been? What is the market that you are sending the flowers?
So currently, the Middle East would be our biggest market. So we're doing a lot into the Middle East, Asia, and of course now to the mother company in Australia. So when you asked about if we have choices in terms of the airlines that we choose to work with, see, for a market like Australia, I would want to work with a few carriers, say, for example, Emirates or QR, because unfortunately in the Middle East and in Australia, we do not have a lot of freighters. So these destinations that we fly and they do not have the freighters, we have to use the Pax Airlines.
Yeah.
So in this scenario, you want to go with the more established companies for longer route, that is into Australia. So most of the time, we'll have BSAs with both of those into Australia. But for the Middle East, we will take what is given to us because the capacity is limited and we have to fight, with sometimes, the meat and the fresh produce. So capacity into the Middle East is very strained currently. So we take what we can get, basically.
As far as flower is concerned, you're 100% air freight.
100% air freight. We had explored the option of trying to get into sea freight, trying to do something for Australia, but the docking stations were not very friendly. So we're still trying to find something into that particular market.
Do you export to Europe or any other countries?
Yes, we do. And that for that market as well, we take what we can get in terms of capacity.
Okay.
Yeah.
Clement, in terms of the dynamics that you see in the geopolitics, which is affecting decisions in terms of logistics, global trade, tariffs are one of the important politicians said this is the most beautiful word. How do you align with your members? You are an advocacy organization, industry organization, working for the member companies within your organization. How do you align with the rapidly changing situation outside, and to kind of get all of them together to some of the goals that you have?
For us, we must have a global picture of where things are, and I always say we have always to remain ahead of the growers, exporters. Otherwise, we'll be irrelevant. So we have to understand the geopolitics and what is happening in the outer space, so that we guide our members with the right knowledge that they need and understanding of how the market is changing and the dynamics outside what they do. Because for those who are growers or exporters, their business is to either grow or export. And all those other factors are extra from what they do every day. We don't sell as Kenya Flower Council. We stand in the place of understanding the terrain of the global flower trade and what is happening. And whenever it's possible, we step in on their behalf, representing them within those conversations. Be they at a bilateral level. Today, we are looking at the expansion of our markets. Because I always say Europe is not as elastic as we think. Today, we can say Europe is the biggest market. But it's constrained at the moment. There is no much we can stretch. If we are at 40%, are we likely that in the next 10 years we can move to 50%? Very unlikely. And therefore we have to start looking elsewhere to grow new markets, emerging markets, and create an image that will attract much more buyers from elsewhere to buy from Kenya. So working with government on the bilaterals, and especially as relates to tariffs and other regulations within those markets is very key. Even looking at intervening when we look at the geopolitics around what is happening around this Red Sea. The typical grower exporter, that is far removed. They understand, but there is nothing they can do about it. But for us is where we step in with the government and ask, is there something that government can do within the realm of country to country with all the superpowers, discussing and finding mitigation measures around what is happening? Because we believe that there is potential moving our flowers through the sea, but this bottleneck, can we be able to remove it? Including also what is happening with the phytosanitary. You mentioned about phytosanitary, and which is an important thing for us. That's where we step in. Yes, we have a responsibility to work and handhold our members and the industry on compliance. But on the other hand, these are matters that are being discussed at a much higher level within the marketplace with the EU and with DG Santi and the rest. That is where we step in with government to cushion them so that the market remains open for them. So that's the role that we play in all this ecosystem, so that the growers can concentrate on what the growers exporters can concentrate on what they are good at, instead of going into any of those kind of negotiations where we can step in. So all these at a macro level is where we basically step in. And we see in all these, there are opportunities at every level. Even when you're talking about taxes, for example, that is local. This gives us an opportunity to move into the review of policies and taxes and smoothening the tax and legislative regimes, working closely with government. So it's still an opportunity to relook at some of those things. If we are looking at phytosanitary, this is where we need to create trust with the market. If we're looking at sustainability in different markets, that's where we create a niche for our product, that it has conformed to all the compliance, the requirements of the market. So we don't just sit and see challenges. We see opportunities where we can surge ahead of our competition by doing certain things, innovating, moving into technology, finding creative ways in which you can be able to surmount these challenges collectively, of course, with the industry and our members. And that is the realm where we play.
Yeah, I know that you have a very tough job. As I remember you mentioned in your keynote that when you joined, you thought it was a labor cost as the most significant part. Turned out that it is a freight cost. I know probably you must be spending a lot of your energy dealing with that. You mentioned about how to add ad hoc air freight capacity ahead of the peak season. My next question is to all the players in the air freight logistic value chain, 2 airports and 1 airline. I think the air freight value proposition is about speed, reliability, predictability, and visibility. Jacob, Patricia, and Sam, are you noticing a demand shift in the mode of transport when it comes to perishable logistics, or is air freight losing the essential value proposition?
Thank you very much. Air freight in itself, the value proposition will actually keep mutating, but will still converge on speed. That's the biggest value proposition. But in this region and globally as well, you know that our youthful population is a key driving force. And this means that their preferences in consumption of the business and products will basically move towards those 3 aspects of predictability and reliability of supply chains. And moving to what Clement mentioned earlier, that the demand for finished bouquets is on the rise. How the model shift will affect that is one question. But if it's going to be e-commercing flowers right now, in the nearest future, then you'll find that the consumers will be getting directly in touch with the growers so that they eliminate anybody in the middle, and the consolidation will be of the final consumer and not to the auctions, as it were. So those market dynamics will change because of the digital space coming in, artificial intelligence coming into play, robotics coming into play in warehousing and delivery of these aspects at destination. And we have to be prepared on the same, because that will affect not only the product mix that enters into the aircraft, but now the product mix with these airlines will also change. I'm glad to mention that the diversification of our market is now not looking only at EU, where we would have distribution, but you can see we have new airlines coming back. Etihad is back. We have Salam Air coming in. We have Air Asia. And while they study this market and see that the agro-based industry is a strength that we have in this region, then the freighters that are missing to connect into Australian market and further east into the Russian market will definitely change. I remember we used to go with Emirates, we used to go to Moscow, but the market was in Siberia. So instead of going to Moscow directly from Dubai, the route for DME airport emerged, and now there are direct shipments Nairobi straight via Dubai into DME. So those dynamics and connectivity indices are taking place. So for the e-commerce itself, it will really, really change the play. But when it comes to multimodal aspect of the business, we have just mentioned that we are looking very keenly on the further development of another transit shed in Mombasa so that we can be able to have the sea air advantage. Djibouti is already doing it with Rwandair and Ethiopian Airlines, and we feel that the positioning that is favorable to us geologically and geopolitically of Mombasa would be able to do a good job in the redistribution of the same. Now that Kenya Railways has put a few reefers on the rail, and that means production and freight processing activities can be done at JKIA, and then you move into ICD and you roll down to Mombasa. The Mombasa airport has been busy right now, but we need expansion of our cold chain facilities so that we can actually be able to accommodate that demand. Because when you're dealing with perishables, time and temperature are the imperatives that you have to compare and make sure that your competitive advantage is on the same, so that you can be able to only get support functions from ICT and human resource. So from our side, we feel that the landscape is going to change, but the model shift, we cannot say there will be a shift in the demand curve, but a shift along the demand curve, which means you have to look at what is your priority in terms of what you put into the sea freight. Is it high care or regular flowers, or what you put into your air freight, where you have got a more value intake and quality is not jeopardized? Thank you.
Patricia?
Well, I think speed is still there. And it's still valued, especially in horticulture, because that is very important. So as much as the sea freight, like KFC CEO had said, it will never be 100% sea. There's still an opportunity for air freight to permanently dominate because of the speed aspect. I know every year when we have this, everyone talks about the air freight costs going up. But for airlines, the business terrain is very difficult, and it's becoming more and more difficult, especially because customers are more demanding, because you want on-time service, you want flexibility, and nowadays there's visibility even in pricing. It's not like what it was 10 years ago, isn't it? Because even flower growers know what the prices are, but 10 years ago, it was the freight forwarders who controlled and told you what it was, but nowadays you even know what is the airline actually charging. And the margins are quite thin nowadays. And there's also, there are many airlines that are waking up and coming into this region. And why? Geographically, how Kenya is placed as an airport, and not only for the passengers, but also for cargo. Everyone wants to come and dock here because they know that they'll have something to go back with. So anyone who's operating here, we are competing, isn't it? All of us, we are competing as airlines because everyone wants to pass by here. But the costs are also expensive for us. And as we go forward, you'll see that e-commerce growth can dictate the pricing for the outgoing. And like for us as a country, if the taxes are high, since the government is taxing a lot and the disposable income is less, e-commerce growth in the country goes down, and that affects the imports. And for any freighter company, for you to have a reduced pricing going out, then that means you need to come in when whatever you're bringing in and depositing here or transiting with already has taken like 3/4 of the price. Then that will improve the pricing for whatever we're carrying going out of Nairobi. But if e-commerce is not growing in the country as Kenya, people to do more of e-commerce buying, then it means that we pass on most of the cost to the outgoing cargo. We have representatives of ground handling here, and they can tell you, like Nancy from Kenya Airways, the ground handling. Imports are not a lot, and that is why you're talking of the rates going up to 4.4 this year. Because remember, taxes started from last year for the country, isn't it? So as it was increasing, And so is the demand going down. So if an airline is coming down, let's say charging something like $2 only, and they need $5 for the, or $8 for the whole trip, you see, then they have to pass the rest to the outgoing. So those are some of the things that KFC will probably have to, as they're talking to other government arms, looking at that, hey, we have the horticulture in this country. And yes, we want the horticulture to grow because it is an earner of foreign exchange for the country. So one arm cannot kill the other. We need both to grow. So we need the e-commerce to grow. And we also need the horticulture to grow because as the e-commerce grows, then airlines will come in full and reduce the air freight rate going out. Then there's also this other way in which maybe the flower growers and the freight forwarders can look at things. Maybe you can look at having a round trip cost, like talk to your freight forwarders. Some of them are big international companies. They can actually be able to fill in the airlines coming down, like let's say Kunde Nagel, Schenker. They're big brands, DHL. So if they assure the airline of coming down and you're working with them, then they can also be able to get a good pricing going out. So they take the whole round trip, and that means throughout the year, they can be able to guarantee you capacity and a good rate. That would be my thoughts on it.
Patricia, what the total annual volume airlifted, how much of that is flowers? Approximately.
On Astral?
Astral, yeah.
On Astral, you could say probably 60%. What we uplift is flowers, yes, into Middle East, into Eastern Europe, and into Saudi Arabia.
What is the biggest challenge, like in adding an ad hoc freighter out of Nairobi during peak season? What is the biggest challenge?
For us, the biggest challenge is being assured of the return cargo. So yes, when we have discussions, we can say, you can tell us, yes, we want you to fly in 2-3 times. Yes, easily, Sanjeev will say, yes, we can do that. But the problem is, I cannot be able to have return cargo 4 times a week. So that will limit me. I'll tell you, like maybe only twice a week, yes, I can do it. Then I can look for cargo for the return. Because all this is informed by the trade trends.
But then is there a price point that, like it happens in the e-commerce, like Shein and Temu, they're willing to pay that price and get the cargo into the destination, and the return is probably empty. Is there a price point where the shippers are willing to do that? Do discussion like that happen?
Yes, that happens, and it depends on the route. So okay. Like Europe, yes, they would be willing to do that because the yields and the pricing for the flowers in Europe is high. But for places like Middle East and Saudi Arabia, no. Because even in the last, the Mother's Day that has just passed, for Saudi Arabia, they declined to do charters because they said, no, we don't want to pay so much. So those discussions, it depends on the market. And for other places or new places, like let's say Eastern Europe, places like Almaty, yes, they would be willing to, and they pay that, and so we would do charters for them that time.
Sam, hearing all of this, air freight, the speed, the value proposition, is it a problem?
I see more a solution, and I think 2 things said are, to my opinion, and that has nothing to do in the end with an airport, although we'll still be there, is something Clement and something Jacob said. Clement said in an earlier talk, being a logistics hub for Eastern Africa, and I think there is part of the solution, because also to what Patricia said, is getting that cargo in, or getting the reason for a plane to be here is key. And of course, as a grower, it's very hard, but as a country or as a community, there is the solution, because if you can be that logistics platform where things come in and are distributed from, there is a reason for that. And the second thing is something Jacob said is about, or as I see it, is that added value, or the value added, sorry. And if you can go away from just I know from just growing flowers and leaving them to the market, and then to other people, to other parties to get their markups and to get profit, getting control over that with, for example, indeed finishing or finished bouquets and selling that through e-commerce platforms, then you can also control and regulate the profit more, and you're less to the mercy of others and of what they charge. So I think there are two solutions that everybody can see for himself. Can I add to that? Can I maybe do something? You're all entrepreneurial, that you already proven. So what can we do there to take more control? Because I think for the last 10, 20, 30, 40 years, you've maybe gave away too much of that control and are now in a position where it's more difficult. I think that is something I wanted to add.
Okay. If there is a question from the audience.
Good morning, everyone. I hope it's still morning. Yes, good morning. My name is Rachel from Tradewinds Logistics. I have a question to Mr. Jacob Bwana, and it's not really a question, and to the rest of the panel, your opinion towards the just finished Valentine's period, because it was one of the very unique ones that we've had. Tradewinds Logistics is a freight forwarder, and what we experienced is we actually predicted a capacity constraint. And therefore, from the last week of January, the second last week of January, towards the first week of February, we were ready for trouble. But come the 28th, 29th of January, everything opened up. Credit to the Chinese New Year, because now the carriers were able to release the freighters that were routing the more high revenue generating sectors, and everyone deployed an aircraft or two into Nairobi. And we had a scenario where you would be seated in the office at 7 p.m. because it's high season and you're trying to figure it out, and you'd get a call and carriers would ask, do you have cargo? We are positioning something tonight. And fortunately, we had growers who had already brought in cargo and were able to, secure space and fly it out. But this has happened pre-COVID. I remember in 2018, I think something close to this happened because of the Chinese New Year and when it happened. But that we did not experience that. So we had an influx of airlines or carriers coming in last minute, meaning they had an easy way, or it was a bit flexible for them getting landing permits, landing slots, and all that from, of course, our landlord. And also, they came in at a slightly cheaper rate than the normal carriers in the market. So you find a carrier had already signed up something, but this one has called it tonight and said, I'm positioning something, I'm at half the rate. And of course, everyone ran for it. So in your opinion, what exactly was different this time from the last few years this has happened?
Jacob? Oh, yeah.
Thank you very much. You see, we really get to understand the stakeholder needs in terms of what capacity is required and which direction their shipments are going. We have got that level of visibility. Every Monday, we mention and talk to leaders of business member organizations of what capacity we expect to find to be available in the market. And actually, on a daily update, we mention to the stakeholders as well what actually was executed. That level of knowledge makes it easier for us to have very perishable capacity not existing as it previously is. By this I mean, all capacity that comes in, we always intend stakeholders to have it fly as booked. This actually is what's different from what previously happened. I remember when we had the ash cloud a couple of years ago, we had to zigzag or land in Tunisia so that you can ship across the tunnel, and then you can road freight your stuff to the market, or go to Joburg and use the other route into the Americas and back. So costs were very, really expensive. But consumers would understand the same concept because it was a phenomena that we could call a force majeure, for example, just like there was a COVID period. But what I'm trying to say is our relationship with the stakeholders is really geared towards data sharing, so that data analytics takes center stage in terms of how decisions are made, how much you'll produce, and how much you'll move to which direction. So that aspect of having constant relationship and communication with our stakeholders is what actually is making it possible. But on the issue of licensing and the frequency aspect, of course, we actually the airport operator, and we focus on the structures, processes, and functions that enhance the business environment. The cost of doing business notwithstanding, sometimes we offer incentives depending on the circumstance and period. We can agree that our landing and parking fees can be paid in a preceding period, not waived, paid, but to facilitate a calamity that we are going to have, produce getting spoiled just because of an ad hoc request. We are in a relationship with the regulatory authorities, and of course we are here to facilitate the business and make sure the agro-business grows, because we look at it outside and wider of the function that we fulfill as per how much we are responsible for, so that our relationship with KCA as well looks beyond what can be produced and what can be exported, so that we don't have a situation which we call a bullwhip effect, to the extent that there's so much produced for export and then there's so much constricted capacity, and we might feel there's an overproduction, yet it's a normal situation, and then we have a lot of losses, and that really kills the market, and that makes the competitors have an advantage over us. So communication and constant talking and data sharing has been a key center stage. And actually we are in a process of creating a very versatile air cargo community, like what you have in Brussels, what you have in Frankfurt, what you have in Maastricht, and also what you have in Amsterdam, so that there is proper communication between everybody and every custodian when goods are exchanging hands along the entire value chain, so that the end result is time compression and quick and visible transactions, so that in future we'll find the community trading in blockchains, so that there's a lot of transparency and trust. And that's the direction we are taking, and I think things will get better and better. Thank you.
I'd like to thank all my panel members, Sam, Eliud, Elizabeth, Claris, Clement, Jacob, and Patricia. Please put your hands together for the panel.